Now we're going to have our first keynote speaker for this afternoon. And this is an amazing person. First off, Governor Walz was a high school geography teacher. It's amazing. Then somehow...
He's one of us, Jack. He's one of us.
Well...
At a different level.
At a different level.
Sorry to hear.
Yeah, okay, here he is. Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank
welcome,
you very much.
Governor. Okay, I won't give the whole history, Governor.
No.
Okay, you take it.
Jack just said he won't give a whole history. That's what we live for, to hear that introduction. Jack, thank you for a lifetime of optimism, a lifetime of creating a vision of a united world, a more equitable world. I will also say, and this is true, research shows the least productive time of the day is 2:55 p.m. True. So he scheduled the elected officials. But thanks to all our presenters. More to all of you, a huge thank you to the creators, the users, the planners, the visionaries who are here. Thank you for that. I have the privilege of being the 41st governor of Minnesota, and I was at the National Governors Association last week where I was with my colleagues from across the country. My peers are in this room. I'm trained as a geographer and spent over 2 decades teaching in the public schools, teaching geography. So to be in this space with you, to understand how, and my life being driven by understanding an interconnected world through graphic representation of data, I'm grateful for all of you. And I hope when I'm done today, that appreciation for the work you do is a means to an end. And the end product of these maps is a more sustainable economy, a more sustainable environment, and lifting up of people's lives in a more, in a way that they can thrive. So thank you for all of that. I will say, as a school teacher, I would tell my students a little about myself, and I'll do that with you. Not because I think you care, but because we're all products of our past. And I won't debate geography as destiny, but there's no doubt where you are, as Jack said, where you are has a lot to do with who you are. I grew up in a small town in western Nebraska in the Sandhills. And all you small town people, we do this with each other. We try to out small town other small town people. 24 kids in my graduating class. Some of you think you won. 12 were cousins. So there you go. I grew up summers working on Everett Brown's Hereford Ranch, about 60 miles from anywhere, working cattle, building fence, putting up hay. And at the end of the day, as a young 14-year-old, I would go back to the bunkhouse with the other ranch hands, who would mostly play cards and teach me profanity. There wasn't much else to do. I would pick up the boxes of the old National Geographics and dream of exotic places that were far away from where I was at. Having no concept at that time, others were probably dreaming of the exotic landscape I was in. I tell my kids this story about working on Everett Brown's Hereford Ranch and working cattle and doing all this. They think it is the most boring Yellowstone episode they have ever heard. They are not impressed by it. 2 days after my 17th birthday, my chain-smoking Korean War veteran father took me to join the Army. I spent the next 24 years in the Army National Guard. I was an artilleryman. 2 things you have to know as an artilleryman: exactly where you're at on the Earth's surface and exactly where everybody else is at on the Earth's surface. Pretty important to know where you're at on that. But I used that opportunity to use the GI Bill and do what my real passion was, to go get a degree in geography and to teach. And I had the opportunity to do some really interesting teaching. My first job was as a 4th grade teacher at Wolf Creek Elementary on the Pine Ridge Reservation of South Dakota. And then I got the chance to be part of the first group of officially sanctioned American high school teachers to teach in a high school in the People's Republic of China. So they taught us workable Mandarin and sent me to Fosang, Guangdong, where they speak Guangdonghua. So it's like teaching you French and sending you to Czechoslovakia to teach. It was a bit of a challenge. And then I moved and got a chance to teach in western Nebraska in Alliance. I saw some folks here, our friends from the UK. That's Carhenge. You have a replica made out of stone, I understand, from that. So just so you know, that's Carhenge. But it was in Alliance, Nebraska, where one of those moments for all of you, when you look back, at the time, they don't seem like anything. You make a choice. Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I walk through this door? Should I walk through that door? I got an opportunity to walk through a door in 1993, early 1992. It was the National Geographic Summer Geography Institute. And as a young or youngish teacher, and thank you, Dr. Tiefenthaler, the Summer Geography Institute was so far ahead of its time. It had standards in teaching geography that said a geographically literate fourth grader should know this, this, and this. A geographically literate eighth grader should know this, this, and this. And a geographically literate adult should know this, this, and this. And it was at that conference that you got all kinds of freebies. Look, we're public school teachers. We steal everything, pens, whatever it is. We take it. We take it. But there was something in there that I'm like, well, what is this? And it was some floppy disks that I could take back to my Mac 2E with a user's manual this thick of something called GIS from a company called Esri. And I went back home and I learned how to use that. That same year, I got a second one of those inflection moments. I got a chance to be a Balfour Fellow to the not yet opened U.S. Holocaust Museum. Abysmal state of Holocaust education and genocide studies had that Holocaust Museum pick a teacher from each state. And I was lucky enough, I think geographic affirmative action, nobody else from Nebraska applied, and I got it. So they sent me there. And now I had two things. I had what I considered a tool after I learned the GIS, and I said to my colleagues, this is going to change the way we teach and change the world. 25 years after Jack figured that out, that it was going to, I at least figured that out. And I said, I think it could be applied in ways we hadn't been thinking about. And so I took that GIS, taught it to my students, they taught me in a lot of cases, and used the work we had done around Holocaust education. Look, my students could tell you when the Holocaust happened, but for them, it was a historical anomaly in time. And they could write it off to monstrous people, and that was about where it went. The idea that you were reactive to every situation and that we could not be proactive as a people to address really difficult issues like the killing of thousands or millions of fellow citizens or climate change or anything else. And so those students got to work and they started layering GIS. They started looking at food insecurity, potential drought, just like the UN was doing around famine early warning. And then they started laying over colonialism. And they started overlaying all these things. And the capstone project was, this is 1993 for my seniors, was to come up and publish, looking at a global world map with all the layers they'd put in GIS, where do you think the next genocide's gonna be? And they came up with Rwanda. 12 months later, the world witnessed the horrific genocide in Rwanda. Very traumatic for those kids. I will say though, many work for NGOs now. Many work globally on trying to make differences. Many join different organizations that many of you are a part of to be part of that. And it was profound, the impact that you could make. And many of them became cynical about the ability, why didn't anybody listen? How could a bunch of students in Western Nebraska in Alliance use a computer program and some past historical knowledge to come up with this? Why was nobody doing anything about that? Well, a few months after that, I got a package in the mail. And it was a book, and it came from the author Frank McCourt of Angela's Ashes fame. And it was Frank McCourt's book when he was teaching that he wrote about teaching public school in New York City called Teacher Man. And inside that was an inscription that said, "You, Mr. Walz, are Teacher Man, Frank McCourt." It was one of my proudest moments. Went on then to coach a high school football team to a state championship. So you may be wondering right now, oh, that's a great story. This guy's having some good stuff. Yeah, then in 2006, I got elected to the United States Congress and flushed it all down the toilet. I went from being respected by my neighbors and my peers to being just slightly less popular than syphilis at one point. That is what happened. But I took that ability to say geography and connectedness. Again, if anybody tells you they're going to run for Congress or governor and they prepared their life to do that, run from those people. They are scary. But my life prepared me well for this. When I got to Congress, I talked to a gentleman yesterday from Afghanistan, and we were talking about this. I remember sitting in an Armed Services Committee hearing, and this was during the Afghan conflicts, and I was talking about the movement of the Pashtun minority in the region. And I said, that damn Durand line is causing all kinds of problems and needs to be taken into consideration. Now we're talking about this. Blank stares from my colleagues. Blank stares. You know all the things that you have to worry about that keep you up at night? Let me add one to that. A geographically illiterate member of the United States Congress is a very scary proposition. And your work informs that. Well, I decided that I was going to get out of there. And in 2018, the people of Minnesota gave me the privilege of being elected governor. Someone asked me too, they said, "Do you miss being in Congress?" I said, "I'd rather eat glass than be in Congress." The difference is with the governor, you can make a difference. And the idea of using geography and maps and connectedness, that one of the things that I understood was that the connection or the lack of connection was the ability to convey complex information. That was my job as teacher. That was my job as a senior enlisted soldier. That should have been my job in Congress, but it's much more reactive. As governor, the ability to use what I knew about mapping and the visual display of data to convey complex issues, to affect change amongst people is really important. And lo and behold, very soon into my first term, having to convey complex information about immunology because of the COVID pandemic was really important to be able to do this. I was lucky I have the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, and a lot of folks knew what they were going to do. But it wasn't that simple. The social buy-in to this became very difficult. I was just talking with Brian, and Brian told me this. Some of you know in here that Johns Hopkins GIS map of COVID is the most viewed GIS map in the history of the world because people wanted to know, wanted to get there. And that was the power, and it worked. The power to understand these maps, the power to show people where things were happening, the power in real time to show where vaccines were available or where we were having highest level of transmission. And I'm proud to say, Minnesota was a state that had some of the highest vaccination rates and some of the lowest deaths from COVID. That's real life implications of map makers saving people's lives. That's you, that's all of you on how it works. So moving into and talking about this, and some of you see this, Jack, I'm sure, I don't think Jack trademarked this, but my campaign theme was One Minnesota, uniting and building a One Minnesota. The idea that we are a very diverse state. We are diverse and optimistic people. We walk on water half the year. That's how optimistic we are. Everything from every can of Spam to Post-it notes to inventing water skiing. But we're diverse. And look, you all know this. What you're doing here is hard. There is an entire cottage industry on dividing people and cynicism. Uniting is much harder. Bringing people together is much harder. The tools of GIS and the science behind this and the ability to communicate make a huge difference. And I'll have to tell you, this One Minnesota thing isn't political. I talked, and I remember using that map, conveying information, having Mayo Clinic doctors there, explaining to people why this was. And I got asked at a press conference, whatever, "I don't want to do this. I think you're politically pushing this on me." I said, "Look, I don't care what your motivation is or where you're at on this. Go get yourself vaccinated and wear a mask so that you're alive to vote against me in November." And no kidding, I had a guy come up to me afterwards and he said, "Well, I got vaccinated, Governor, and I voted against you, but you still won." And I'm like, "All right, we can get there." But it's about building trust. It's about being there. Look, we have a vision of what we want to see our world to be, and I believe you've got to have the visionaries. You've got to be, it has to be aspirational. And my wife and I talk about this. We named our oldest daughter Hope for a reason. It's the most powerful word in the universe. But my wife often reminds me of this. It's not a damn plan. You can't hope we stop global warming. You can't hope we bring equity into how we're doing power and economic justice and environmental justice. You have to have a plan. The tools for that plan are GIS. The tools set in front of us are how we can transfer a vision of a fairer society into one that actually has results. And this is the interface with the cynicism of elected office. My job is to have to be able to convey that. GIS helps build trust. Conveying data to people in a complex way helps build trust. If we can start to build the trust, we can start to make the difference. So in Minnesota, that triple bottom line that we're trying to get at, environmental, social, and economic justice, you are the people to make that happen. And I'm going to give a shout out to Mingeo folks. Allison Slatz is around here somewhere. I'm not sure where she's at, but this is one of your peers. This is one of your peers. Look, they have 680,000 user licenses in Esri. State of Minnesota is number 40. Esri's been around for 50 years. We've been users for 49 years of that. The partnerships, the things we build, the things that you do are making a difference. So I want to talk a little bit about them. The things that are the big issues that we're going to have to get at. You know what really challenges people? Is when you have an aspiration and it's so big, they can't wrap their mind around how they're going to get to those solutions. So you've got to be very clear. You've got to understand. And the issue around climates, look, folks in Minnesota know severe weather is a possibility all the time. We understand it, from floods to wildfires to everything else. But we are going to do our part in this. Last year, we passed the most aggressive, and this is where my political opponents said, he's trying to turn Minnesota into California. They never say that crap in February, though. They never talk about it in February. It's all, oh, no, don't talk about California in February. It's cold here. But our approach was, we're going to have clean energy by 2040. But the issue is, if the public doesn't know how we're going to get there, if there's not measurable, displayable progress that they can see, it's going to be very, very difficult to get them to buy in. So one of the things you're looking at, this histostalled map, which is great to say a word in audience that people know what it is. Peat bogs, there we go. We got a bunch of that. These things are critically important. There's a lot of you in this room that certainly know that. They make up about 3% of the Earth's surface. They contain about 30% of the Earth's carbon sink. And Minnesota has the second most of these, only behind Alaska. So to map them where they're at, really important. But that's just the start, because Minnesota is also a world leader in agricultural production. So when you take corn and soybeans and sugar beets, and you add to that animal agriculture, we're the leading producer of turkeys. By the end of this, I'm like tour guide for Minnesota, you know, too. So if you eat turkey, it's coming from that. But we also have people. And in the metro area of the Twin Cities, it's about 3 million people, and of course, they're spreading out. But the maps, and all of you in here that make this happen, we're able to be very deliberate on our land usage to make sure, above all else, we're protecting that peat land, we're protecting that carbon sink, and we're continuing to build for the future. Those are things we're doing. Look, we're 2040 energy. We are the first state off the coast that's a clean car state that has California clean air standards. All those things make a difference, but we could ruin all that progress by simply not paying attention to little things. So when we give land use permits and things like that, we are down to the square meter on where these important lands are at. That's you. That's the work you've done. So if you want to take part in this, this is how you get it done in making a difference. It's you. It's people powered. I think about this. The person who flies the drone, the person at the DNR, the natural resources, the map makers, the person that puts it forward so that it can come to the legislature. We can show this and we can pass legislation making sure that protection of those lands is first and foremost. But again, we can still produce the food and we can still use land use in a smart way. All of that to say is to try and think about creating that future. Minnesota has 11 indigenous tribes. We're the ancestors of future generations. It is our responsibility in the moment we're living in now to figure out what we can do about this. And in Minnesota, we're making the case that, again, simple, it's true, but what are you going to do about it? Our children are our future. We created a new Children, Youth, and Family branch of government. But the one thing that we did is we said that we are going to clearly tackle, not just aspirationally, oh, you know, we're going to reduce something. We're going to do this. How are you going to do it? How are you going to convey it? What do your dashboards look like? And are you getting public buy-in to do it? And one of the things that we did, we have made the pledge. We're one of 5 states with the lowest childhood poverty rates. We are going to become the lowest within the next 12 to 18 months. And the way we're going to do that is we have the most aggressive child tax credit in the country. Meaning, and again, this is coupled with the most progressive tax code. Meaning if you make more, you pay more. If some of you are getting paid a lot here, I'm sorry, we have a lot of services. It's good. Come to Minnesota. You can still get it. But I don't make any apologies about it, because that progressive tax code lets us lower things like childhood poverty, lets us lower things like uninsured rates. But here's the kicker in this. Because we have that tax code, many of our citizens don't have to file an income tax. They don't have to file income tax. They don't make enough to be able to get to that. That in itself is not a problem, except for a tax credit, a refundable tax credit. You got to file taxes for that. So we had this great idea to reduce childhood poverty. We passed a law, most aggressive in the country, to give money back to families with children up to age 18, reducing childhood poverty. Because it's amazing. You know why people are poor a lot of times? They don't have any money. And a lot of times, if you can get that to them, it makes a difference, and especially with children. But we had to get out there and find out who's not filing for taxes and break it down to the street level. And what that means is the people who made these maps for us, we then deployed our resources out there to go to people and went where they were at, whether it was their houses of worship. We set up pop-up tax filings outside of grocery store doors. We went almost door to door. And historically, when we do a tax credit, after that tax credit's been in place for 5 years, we usually have an uptake of about 70 to 75%. In our first 6 months of this, we had an 82% uptake, meaning we were hitting the people who needed it, reducing childhood poverty by 1/3 in the state of Minnesota. That's how the maps that you do. That's what you're able to do. So look, it's life-changing. This is a message to you. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but the choir needs to sing. This stuff works. This stuff makes a difference. The map is wonderful to look at. It's exciting. It's cool, the stuff we're doing. Now translated into improving lives, bringing about equity and sustainability. That's the part where the better those maps are and the better the people who have to convey the information makes the biggest difference. Same thing here. We talk about this. Okay, we have a healthy environment. We have a healthy children and a workforce that we need to train. Thing about Minnesota is on workforce, we have the lowest unemployment rate. I'm really proud of Minnesota. I know I'm saying this on. It's cold as hell in the winter, so I'll measure it with that. It does get cold, so if you're thinking of moving there. But we have the lowest unemployment rate, and we have one of the highest labor participation rates. We can't afford to lose a single worker. We're experiencing what Japan's experiencing. We're Norway, Finland. Northern developed economies that are seeing a drop-off in population because we're aging. And the issue here is for us to be as strategic as possible. We're very proud of our youth service and our youth skills training at those high-impact jobs that we need to get. Using the map of where we have that, matched up with the employers who are there, overlaid with our high school graduation rates, means fewer students drop through the cracks. So now we have a healthy environment with healthy children and a trained workforce. All those things equal a state that's thriving more, and you see all of those indicators. And what I tell those who politically or ideologically disagree with this, I don't care if you want to do any of this because it's the right thing to do, it is, but all of these things create a healthier economy and make everyone wealthier. And so if you're in this just for the money, it's still a good idea. It means you're a horrible person if that's why you're in it, but it still shouldn't prohibit you from doing it. So this is where it all happens, good governance. It's where we get things done. It's where we make a difference. Look, I got to be honest with you. Maps and the way we've done it have such a big influence in my life. I am not surprised to see where we're going with them. I am surprised that I'm governor of Minnesota. Somebody asked me, are you surprised you're governor of Minnesota? I couldn't be more surprised if I woke up with my head stapled to the carpet, but I am. And now that I am, use the life knowledge that was there, and that's why I said, my peers, you are creating change in a massive way. AI is going to accelerate that if we are able to deploy it correctly, but I will come back to all of you in here, especially if there's the educators. We have got to get the literacy on Geographic and GIS out to the broader public so that we can make sure that happens. We have to do better. So look, you were talking, I'm not going to let them. Governor Newsom uses this too, and we use this. I want to thank all the Esri folks, all the developers, everybody who does this. These executive portfolios that they put together with us allow us an opportunity to do some amazing things. And what we're able to do is, if you're looking, you're seeing our portfolio, is to be able to go to a massive amount of data that's able to come up and able to us to translate our vision of the type of world we want to live in with the policies that we are able to pass and then to implement them. And one example, we did something in Minnesota last year too. We passed universal free meals, breakfast and lunch. Never again, yeah. Some of you know, never again are we going to give a kid a different colored lunch ticket to try and shame them. For Christ's sakes, we produce more food in Minnesota than any place on the planet. Our kids can eat a damn donut or something for breakfast or something healthier. Turkey or something for breakfast. That's something we can do. And we implemented this, and what we saw was what you would expect. Because the critics said, we already have this free program. Yeah, it's hell. You had to fill out all this paperwork, you have to do this, and then it's separated in that lunchroom. But once we did it, we started gathering data about where was it at, what did we use, and then we conveyed this to the public. And by the way, middle-class people saw this as a massive tax cut, and middle-class women who know that if the husband and wife or the partners are working, the women end up doing most of the domestic work at home, which means fixing the damn breakfast when everybody's going to work. So those women said, I have women say to me, thank God you did this. I've got more time and my kids are able to eat. But take, for example, Ely up in northwest Minnesota. Some of you know, or excuse me, northeast Minnesota. They went from 217 students being able to eat there to 536, 147% increase. Oh, and guess what happened too? Truancy rates went down and achievement rates went up and behavioral issues went down. Funny how a kid has food in their stomach, it works. Oh, fun fact, Ely's the entry point to the Voyageurs Canoe Area and the Boundary Wells Canoe Area. It's also home to the National Wolf Center. Minnesota, in addition to peatlands, has the second highest wolf population behind Alaska. So Ely has hungry kids and hungry wolves, not together, but in the same place. So same thing. Our climate portfolio, and again, my God, I'm in a political place. We're still debating the causes of climate change to a certain degree. It's kind of ending. Look, the insurance companies and the actuarials have already made it pretty clear that's happening. So again, I guess I'm agnostic for you on this. We're going to have to address it. We're going to have to build resiliencies. But it becomes really real in a way for families. This map that you're looking at here, this map is Corps of Engineers river gauges that give real-time river depth and almost to the minute predictions of crest of where they're coming. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe some of you saw this. If you saw that picture on TV of that dam that was failing, wouldn't you know that was 6 miles up the Blue Earth River from my house, actually, is where it was at. We had a catastrophic rainstorm, very unusual for Minnesota this late. We didn't have any snow last year. So there was no snow melt. That's usually when our flooding comes. So the flooding was a little different. The patterns were a little different of where we were at. But we're able to use this map to be able to deploy resources accordingly. And now we have more data on flood mitigation and what does a summer flood look like versus the thaw-out floods that we normally see. And these are just things that, this is on my iPad I carry around, and I'm up in a Black Hawk helicopter looking at this, and I can click on those maps and see crest in St. Paul is coming in 12 hours at this point. We've deployed the resources where they need to be. And then, of course, things like jobs. The biggest thing is if we're going to be one Minnesota, if we're going to be one country, it's broadband development. We have hundreds of millions of dollars that were put in to try and do this, to understand speeds, broadband speeds, to connect together. People want to know, and we have this money. It's a very simple thing, but the deployment of these and to be able to articulate that to the public. And if you look, the number of things, and going back into children, youth, and family, food insecurity. I want to give you another one here. We'll go to the next one, and I want to show you something as we come forward on our slides coming up here. There are some other things that we're able to do, maybe. Well, we have the capacity in Minnesota when we put forward, we're trying to deal with lead service lines, lead pipes. And one of the things that we were able to do was we got hundreds of millions of dollars in money for lead service lines. Well, all of you in this room are already thinking this. The first thing you need to know is who has lead service lines. And those lead service lines a homeowner wants to know. And so being able to tell people, look, here's where lead, some of you know this, I think you've seen this. Do you know that when we outlawed lead in gasoline, collective IQ went up 5 points? That's a true story. Now, some of you already, there is a congressional joke in there, I'll save it, but you get it. You get it. But this picture of this, and this is the map you're looking at. This is what you're looking at on the bottom. Here's the power of what you're able to do on this tool. We got hundreds of millions of dollars. We are making a commitment to be the first state to remove lead service lines. There is no level of lead that's safe. And we do know, in all seriousness, the health concerns and what it does has been traumatic. We also know that there's a racial justice issue around this, because we know that it predominantly fell in Black and brown communities. And we knew that those were the people less able economically, because of systemic issues, systemic racism barriers, to be able to remove those pipes. So we made a commitment, we're going to remove them all. We mapped every single one that we had, and this is St. Paul, but here's where it gets really good, and this is the interaction between your map and policies and a united world and good outcomes for people. You can go to that map, find your house, which, by the way, the governor's residence has lead pipes, and you can click on it, see if you have the lead pipe, then you can click on it and schedule an appointment with a contractor, and then you can set that appointment up. That contractor will come to your home. 8 hours later, will have replaced the lead service lines in your house for no cost to you. That's real impact. That's things people care about. That takes the politics out of the things you're doing, and it's measurable to show our progress of where we're at. All of you in here are the visionaries and the creators. Your politics will follow. You're not going to get a lot of that. The politics will follow. But given the right set of tools to the right people who are versed in this language, you can start to make true differences, true ways to unite our world, true ability to be able to bring things together. And I think about this, sitting in that bunkhouse on Everett Brown's Hereford Ranch, looking at this incredible world, and then seeing all of you and all of the people who are here, of us actually caring about that incredible world, and us deciding that this is a group of people that can have a profound impact on that. And I think being able to tell, look, this is a problem we have in Minnesota. Minnesota Lutherans, if you do something good and talk about it, it doesn't count. We need to drop that and talk like hell about the good work that we're doing in GIS. Talk about the tools that we have. Talk about the impacts that we're making. Measure them and show people this. It doesn't become too difficult for people to start understanding, my kids have enough food. My water is clean. We take this seriously. There's no more water. I remember my fourth grader coming home, Jill, with a geographically literate fourth grader who learned about closed systems and said, Dad, do you know we're drinking the same water that the dinosaurs drank? Blew their mind that there's no more, no less. We got to start telling a lot of adults, this water is precious. This land is precious. These peat bogs matter. Oh, and by the way, if we do this right, you can still make money. We can still do the things that we need to do. We can still continue to grow. So when you think about that, us in the upper Midwest, we've got 20% of the world's fresh water. We have a responsibility to do our share. We have a responsibility to show people what we're doing. We have a responsibility to try and educate across that. And we hope that that makes the difference. So to each and every one of you, the team at Esri, thank you. Especially to John, who plied me with Diet Mountain Dew to hype me up before I came out here. Coming at you like a spider monkey, and that's the thing. So, but this team is committed, and they're committed to the educators. And they're committed of having a governor here. The reason for that was they understand what my responsibility is. I need to take it seriously, is to be able to articulate what we're doing, be able to articulate the change, be able to make those things happen. So to each and every one of you, thank you. Thanks for taking your time here. Thanks for leaving your work and coming to San Diego. I know the sacrifice was big, but the intense work is great. And I'm going to give my final thank you to somebody. You know how that old saying, don't ever meet your heroes? That's not true with Jack, because I'll have to tell you, for 30 years, Jack influenced my life in everything that I did, and it was in a positive way. And the chance to get to meet the guy who provided that vision, provided that tools, those floppy disks 35 years ago in that bag, what a huge difference it made. And to see this, I heard the Vice Admiral say yesterday, it is really great to stand next to an unsatisfied visionary. Stay unsatisfied, Jack. Keep working. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
You're the best, brother. Keep working.